Hi, I'm Jeff Davis of the Sonoma County Wine Library Association with today's visual oral history featuring Lee Martinelli Sr. And Lee, thank you for inviting us to this incredible man cave you have built.
You're welcome. Glad to have you here. Yeah, we have a lot of our ancestry's vehicles here, tractors, saddles that we've collected over the years, and we have all kind of in one spot so we can look at them and enjoy them.
Gosh, going back 100 years, it seems like there are some things in here that could be that old.
Well, we actually go further than that, where some of our ancestors came in the 1880s.
That's right.
So,
Still have some of theirs.
so we're like 130 years old, 35 years old. These presses behind us are what my father used, and the crusher over here is what my father used to make wine, homemade wine. So it goes back quite a ways.
Yeah. And what a rich history your family has here in Sonoma County, as we're saying, and that you're continuing to cultivate to this day.
That's very true. And so we were fortunate to have our first generation, the grandparents of my father. They came from Italy in 1880s and settled in Sonoma County and actually in Forestville. And so I'm so happy that they chose Sonoma County in order for us to be able to start farming here. So that gave us our start. That was the first generation, and so now we have six generations.
Six generations now. That's
on
crazy.
Family, yeah.
The Martinelli story began with Giuseppe, who was a young winemaker in Tuscany. Adding to the intrigue of the story is the fact that Giuseppe eloped with young Luisa prior to leaving Italy at the youthful ages of 19 and 16. That indicates a confidence in his skills and their strong desire to create a successful life in the land of opportunity.
That's true, Jeff. He had the skills, but I also think that he and Louisa, not only did they have the skills, but the willpower and the foresight to leave their country, their family, and the country that they knew the language of, come to a foreign country.
Yeah.
That took a lot of fortitude.
With Giuseppe's experience, he was hired when he moved here to work a vineyard with a gentleman in Forestville. Do you know if that vineyard still exists?
You know, I don't know of that vineyard, and I don't know that there's any vineyard around there that I know that is that old. We're the only ones that still have the only original vineyard that Giuseppe planted. So, but I don't know of any other one in Forestville.
Yeah, okay. He seems to have had good business sense because it was just a few years into being here that with the help from a friend, he was able to buy some land fairly quickly. And that's still part of the family to this day, isn't it?
It is. We still have that original property that they bought, and we're just so fortunate to be able to have it and hang on to it and pass it on to the fourth, fifth, and sixth generation. So he was, as you indicated, he was very, very smart and bought the land, and then he had, I understand, 12 wood choppers. They cut down the trees to use that lumber to build a house, to build a winery. And then they sold rails that went to San Francisco. They cut down tan oak trees, took the bark off, and they went to the tanneries in San Francisco. Then they made bark out of the rest of it. So that's how he was able to clear the land and build the building. So it was pretty good. Hauled it all with a horse and a wagon down Martinelli Road to River Road and put it on a train and sold it in San Francisco.
That's what you don't think about when you're driving around. You see all these vineyards that at one point they were probably full of trees, full of redwood trees, and those are big trees to cut down.
Yeah, they didn't have the D8s. In those days, it was a horse and plow to dig out the stumps that they had to have. And you're right, because part of the vineyard that my grandfather had planted was let go back in '55, and it's a forest now. I mean, you can't tell that there was ever a vineyard there. The trees are, 2 feet diameter. Yeah.
As a side note about the time that Giuseppe was planting that vineyard and working in the farms, Paolo and Gemma's son Tony was born, and the first one in the family to be born here in the U.S. And he's the brother of your mother, Alma, is that right? He had quite an entrepreneurial spirit as well.
He was very, very influential, very, very good. You're right. My grandparents on my mother's side, they came from Italy with my mother when she was 3 years old, back in the early 1990s. 1900s, and settled in Sebastopol, and they were apple people. And he expanded. He was the largest apple grower in Sebastopol. Did very well. They were good people in agriculture.
I want to bring them up a little bit later on in the interview.
Yeah.
But now Giuseppe, with his wife Luisa, began planting grapevines on their own property. By that time, they were starting to raise their 4 children, Lino, one of which was your father.
That's true. Yeah, Lino was the youngest of the 4. His oldest brother, Fred, was 16 years older. And then with being an Ida, and my dad was quite a bit younger. And so when my grandfather passed away in 1918, they looked at the hill and decided that they were going to let the younger brother take care of it. So at age 12, my dad started farming that hill with a 2-horse plow. And he farmed it until he was 87 years old. So he farmed for 75 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that vineyard. That steep slope, which took a precarious effort to manage that vineyard, has led to its infamous name.
Yeah, you're right, Jeff. I mean, it used to be all plowed with a horse and plow. And of course, they didn't have to worry about if the rows are exactly straight or not, because the horse would kind of go around through the rows.
Yeah.
But then when you get on a tractor, it's a different story. So about in the 50s, 1955, my father went to a tractor, tried a couple of them, and finally found a John Deere 420 crawler that he used for many years. I'm still using that tractor.
Yeah.
I used it last week, and I'll be using it next week. And it's just low profile, and it sits on the hillside because it's a 60-degree slope,
Yeah.
and it really is steep. So my granddaughter took and welded on the tracks, a metal track. So you got the metal tracks and the cleats slide downhill. So she took and put a piece of metal, welded one in the middle of the track, so it gave it a grip. And so now the tractor really stays on the hill much better than it used to. Yeah.
And much like your father, you're the only one who's driving it now, right? You don't let your sons use it?
I'm the only one that drives it. I don't know that anybody else wants to. They all keep talking about, what are we going to do? We're looking at a grass that stays really low, and then it dies in about June. And so they're looking at other ways to have to keep everybody off that tractor. But in the meantime, I feel the tradition to keep farming.
He ran that tractor until he was 87 years old?
87 years old when he finally stopped and said, Lee, I'm through. That was 1992. And he says, you can take over. So in 1993, I took over. And when I got through the farm, being a little kid on that hill, pruning, suckering, hoeing, picking grapes, it was always steep.
Yeah.
When I got on that tractor, it really got steep. So when I got through disking it, the first time I disced the hill, I told my dad, I said, well, we're not selling those grapes out. We're going to bring them to my winery. And so our first vintage for Jackass Hill was in 1993.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, we haven't mentioned the name of the hill yet.
Oh,
You just did, yeah. Jackass Hill. And it was named that because, was it your mother? Or?
Yeah, so Jackass Hill, my mother passed away, my dad remarried, and his wife came up the hill, and she wasn't used to a farming life. And when she went on the hill and she looked at it and saw what my father was doing on a steep hill with a tractor, she told him, she says, you've got to be a jackass to farm this hill. So those grapes were sold to William Salem, and they went to Sacramento State Fair, and they won sweepstakes over everything. So they asked my dad, what should we name it? He said, well, let's name it Jackass Hill. So they did, and he got a plaque, said Jackass Hill, and then when I farmed the hill, we brought it to our winery and made wine. We didn't know if we were going to be able to get that label accepted by having Jackass on it. So we sent it into the government works. We got it accepted, so that was
Well,
good.
it's because you were raising donkeys on that. That could have been your story, right?
Yeah, there you go. True. Anyway, It's been good.
And you have Zinfandel and Muscat of Alexandria that's been planted there the whole time, and you're still growing that, interestingly, those grape varieties.
You're right. We're growing both of them, and the old Zinfandel, and it's all solid Zinfandel. There's not any of the red grape, just all Zinfandel and Muscat Alexandria. So the question is, why are the grapes, the plants are mixed up? They're not like this whole row is Muscat,
Oh, really?
The Muscat is just dropped here and there, and we don't know why that was. We will never know why it was, because the Muscat ripens about 2 weeks later than the Zinfandel does. And typically you think you'd want to have them all in one spot. So and my father said they never did put Muscat in with the Zinfandel. It was always separate. So then my theory is, whether it's right or wrong, is that the grafters were grafting Muscat someplace else and got the wood mixed up. So when they went to the hill, they got the Zinfandel wood and the Muscat wood mixed up, and that's how we got it.
That makes sense.
But we do make a great Muscat wine, a dry and a sweet out of the Muscat.
Yeah, that's very unusual for this area.
Yeah.
You don't see much of that.
It
Although worldwide, that's one of the most planted Muscats, is Alexandria.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was a popular wine when I went to high school, because I would bring that to some of the parties. It was a good drinking wine.
Yeah, they love to have Lee show up,
Yeah, or you got an invitation.
In 1973, Lee took over management of his uncle Bondi's estate, which was comprised mainly of apple orchards, and began planting vineyards in the rich soil of the Russian River Valley. At that time, the Martinellis were not making commercially available wine yet, so Lee utilized his nurturing skills in another occupation.
I was teaching school, and my grandmother, after my uncle passed away, she says she wanted me to come back and take over the estate. And so I gave it some thought, and then I said, okay, I would. And so, yeah, it was farming, which I used to farming, but it was apples. And and it was a big scale of apples. I was used to grapes. So I took it over, and then I started converting. So I've been farming now 55 years, and so I started converting apples into grapes for probably 45 years, because they were big old trees and they weren't economical. But apple orchards are great. I mean, I do like them. They have a great environment about them, but we had to keep up with the times. And so, yeah, we put in grapes. Yeah.
You were considered a premium grape grower at that time, and you had great demand for your grapes from other wineries across the county. And so at some point, you and Carolyn, your wife, decided, let's start making our own wine.
Yeah, that's true, and there's still big demand for our grapes, and so we did. We started changing our techniques, changed the vineyards over the last 15 years. Technology has really changed, spacing, rootstock, clones, and so we've gone from 12-foot spacing between rows. Now we're down to 6.5-foot spacing, and that's kind of where we stay, 6.5, 7 foot. And it's all about quality for us. It's very expensive to plant those kind of vineyards that take 2,000 vines to the acre, but that's what we have to have for our winery, and that's what other wineries like to buy from us.
And what a great choice you made choosing those hop barns on River Road to be your winery and tasting room. They're such an iconic relic here now in Sonoma County.
It really is, and there's a beautiful building. People look at them, a lot of the young people, they don't know they're hop kilns, but they know the red buildings on River Road.
Right.
And so then when you talk about the cupuloses on top, and then they understand the difference between just a regular barn and a hop barn. Those cupuloses were used to help dry out hops, so that the moisture went out the top of the cupuloses.
Once you were on River Road, I saw on your website there was a sign or reference to 4 young Martinelli children could be seen on the property, hand polishing and packing Gravenstein and Golden Delicious apples to sell, along with fresh pressed juice, apple juice. So this is a good time to point out that your uncle had apples and that you took over. Your name's Martinelli, but you're not related to the Martinelli Apple Cider Company, are you?
That's true. We did sell apples to the Martinelli Apple Cider in Watsonville for probably about 15 years, but no, we were not any part of them, though we did have fresh frozen apple juice that we sold out of the hop kiln at one time. So yeah, it's been a while, but no, we're not related. But you're right, when we took over, there was a lot of apples, so we converted almost all of the apples into vineyard, and so that's what kept us in business.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I interviewed your daughter, Regina, as you know, years ago in the tasting room, and you can still see the writings of the hop kiln farmers who were there at one point. Back in the early 1900s, they wrote on the walls, wrote their names and such, and that's still in the tasting room on the walls, isn't it?
It is, and it's on the walls, and it's on our baler that's built right into the building, the baler for the hops. It's there, and some also River Road was a train track, and that was taken out in 1960, and that's when River Road came in. And so there used to be the steam engines that went up and down River Road. We now, in our tasting room, on the sides, we've taken those big tanks of the steam engines, and that's what encompasses around our tasting room. We had to flatten them out a little bit. It's really thick steel, great big rivets. So what we've done with our properties, tried to bring everything into it that was on our property, whether it was the balers, whether it was the tanks from the steam engines. Even on the top of our tasting room, our rocks came out of the creek, Mark West Creek, on our property, had our grandchildren picking them out. So we're just trying to keep it as authentic as possible.
History is still alive at Martinelli Winery. Yeah. Your family now owns 11 vineyards in Russian River Valley, the Bondi Home Ranch is in Green Valley, and you're in Fort Ross Seaview too.
Yeah, you're right. We're in 3 different appellations, and that's what's really nice, because you can have some of the same clones in the Green Valley, Russian River, and Fort Ross Seaview AVA, and those clones taste different according to that soil, location, and everything else, and that's what's really neat about it.
It is.
And then it's fun trying to decide on a new vineyard what clones you want to put in there, trying something new. How's it going to be on that soil, in that location, in that climate? And it takes you at least 6 years or 8 years to find out
isn't that
if
something?
you plant them. Yeah, but it's the fun part. Yeah, it's just enjoyable.
That's a long time to go, darn, it didn't work. Let's do something else.
Then you got to T-bud it over, and but anyway, it's a challenge.
Well, as you kind of intimated earlier, to this day, you're still selling more grapes than you used to make wine, and 90% is still being sold?
Yeah, probably around 85% is what we sell, and we keep the rest for ourselves. Yeah. And there's big demand for our grapes. As we're good farmers, we do that.
Along with Lee Sr., Lee Jr. and George continue the tradition of a proud legacy of caring for the land as growers and are 100% sustainably farmed.
Correct. Yeah, we are.
Fantastic.
And we do that. And it's important. We like it. We have these vineyards that are 135 years old that my grandfather planted, and they're still producing, so we're sustainable. We treat the ground, and you won't ever hear me talk about dirt. It's always soil.
Oh, okay.
I always talk about the soil, because that's what it is.
Right.
And that's critical for us. If you've got good soil, you've got to have a plant that's going to grow well on it.
Excellent. Yeah. Congratulations, by the way, for you and Carolyn being named the icons for the 2023 Sonoma County Barrel Auction that's coming up very soon. I think this is the second time you've been named an icon, isn't it?
Well, I guess you just live long enough, and they finally put that up. We're very proud to have received that, and it's very nice. We thank the Sonoma County Vintner group that selected us. That's a great award for us, a great honor.
Speaking of respected people at Martinelli Winery, by a chance encounter one afternoon, Lee and Carolyn met talented winemaker Helen Turley and hired her as a consulting winemaker in 1992. With her husband John Wetlaufer, they designed and planted a number of new vineyards for the Martinellis. Helen was one of several talented ladies who would oversee the winemaking process at Martinelli. In 2011, Helen's friend and founder of the Napa Wine Company, Aaron Green, took on the role of consultant. Alongside of Helen and Aaron, Australian Brian Kwame was the winemaker from 1997 through 2017. 2 years before Brian's departure, in 2017, Courtney Robinette Wagoner had signed on with the Martinellis and remains their current winemaker, in addition to Aaron's ongoing consultation. It's great to tell your story and let people learn about it. Thank you for sitting down with us.
Well, it's been great. Enjoyed it. Thank you, Jeff. Good questions, good time. If you have any more
Your history
questions.
made it easy for me, I'll tell you that. Well, thanks for watching this visual oral history from the Sonoma County Wine Library Association. I'm Jeff Davis.